But finally, there's Newt Gingrich. Newt Gingrich started off as just the grumpy, profiteering, also-ran D.C. scam artist guy with all the offices on K Street. But as a late-surging frontrunner now, Mr. Gingrich has turned out to play a really useful role in the race. Not just for Republican voters trying to make a decision about who to vote for president, but for the whole country trying to understand Republican politics right now by watching this Republican presidential race. Newt Gingrich, I think, is the Johnathan Swift character in the race. He's the Eat the Poor candidate. It was 1729 when Irish satirist Johnathan Swift wrote a satirical essay called A Modest Proposal about how the wealthy should deal with the way too many poor people among them. Johnathan Swift wrote, quote, "I think it's agreed by all parties that this prodigious number of children in the arms or on the backs or at the heels of their mothers and frequently of their fathers is in the present deplorable state of the kingdom a very great additional grievance. And therefore, whoever could find out a fair, cheap, and easy method of making these children sound and useful members of the Commonwealth would deserve so well of the public as to have his statue set up for a preserver of the nation." In other words, it would be good for the country to find a use for all these poor kids underfoot and in the way. What is the best use of the poor? Johnathan Swift went on to offer his own solution. He said, quote, "I have been assured that a young, healthy child, well nursed, is at a year old a most delicious, nourishing, and wholesome food, whether stewed, roasted, baked, or boiled. And I make no doubt that it will equally serve in a fricassee or a ragout." We've got to find some useful purpose for the poor. The Johnathan Swift of 1729 suggested eating poor children. He suggested it in order to shock people into thinking about the poor in some way other than their utility or disutility to the rest of society. Newt Gingrich is not suggesting eating poor children. He's suggesting that we get rid of child labor laws, take kids out of the classroom and put them to work as janitors, because that would be useful. The difference is that Johnathan Swift was a satirist. Johnathan Swift was kidding. Mr. Gingrich is not kidding, and he has been not kidding about this stuff for a long time. In Congress in the 1990s, he argued that the federal government should take children away from mothers on welfare. The federal government should take kids away from those moms and ship the kids to orphanages. Poor women should lose their children for the crime of being poor. Reporter Tim Murphy today reminding us about Newt Gingrich's scammy educational enterprise in the 1990s called Earning by Learning. It was supposedly a summer reading program offering kids $2 for every book they read. The point of the story, Mr. Murphy wrote, is that private initiatives often succeed where government programs fail. Earning by Learning was a lean, mean private machine. Quote, "The overhead is entirely voluntary," Mr. Gingrich said of the program in 1995. "The only money goes to the kids. So if you have $1,000 at $2 a book, you can pay for 500 books. Whereas in the welfare state model, if you have $1,000, you pay $850 of that for the bureaucracy." The only problem is that when the Wall Street Journal looked into Mr. Gingrich's program that year in 1995, they found that 90% of the money raised, 90% of the $20,000 raised in the past year, had gone to a man named Mel Steele and 2 other professors. Mel Steele was a former Gingrich staffer who was at the time working on the authorized biography of the House Speaker. So at least that guy was earning. Tim Murphy also notes today another instance where Mr. Gingrich was caught transferring money from a scholarship program he had set up for inner-city students, a scholarship known as the Abraham Lincoln Opportunity Fund. Mr. Gingrich was caught transferring money from that fund to his own political action committee. Newt Gingrich was getting people to donate money under the guise of it going to poor people, and then essentially taking that money for his political action committee and for his official biographer. Now that he's running for president, going after poor people, specifically going after poor kids, has become a centerpiece of his campaign.
And in very poor neighborhoods, you have to literally reestablish the dignity of work. I will tell you personally, I believe the kids could mop the floor and clean out the bathroom and get paid for it, and it would be okay. They'd be dramatically less expensive than unionized janitors. And you'd begin to reestablish the dignity of work.
And they're delicious. Make poor kids work as janitors. Mr. Gingrich now trying to appear more compassionate about this by making clear that while it would be okay for poor kids to be put to work cleaning toilets, he does not want them working in coal mines. That would be cruel. So there's that. Mr. Gingrich has also said this week that he would make the main theme of his campaign in a general election against Barack Obama an attack on food stamps. Mr. Gingrich today calling President Obama, quote, "the finest food stamp president in American history." That's a charge that Mr. Gingrich has decided to level in knowledge of the fact that this president was, in fact, raised by a mom who at one point was on food stamps while she was raising him. In case it wasn't clear yet that the whole compassionate conservatism thing was dead, Newt Gingrich is here to remind us all that the whole compassionate conservatism thing is dead. It is useful to have Mr. Gingrich playing this role, articulating this viewpoint in this race. It's a return to Reagan-era attacks on welfare queens, right? It's eat the poor time. Everybody's got a role to play in this Republican campaign, except for Rick Santorum, of course. Everybody's got a role to play. And Newt Gingrich's role as a frontrunner is that he is a bit of a clarifying tonic for the whole country trying to understand the difference between the two parties on the most important issue of the election and the most important issue in the country, which is, of course, pain, economic pain, the worst income inequality we have seen in generations.